Hey guys, this is the reading video for our Unit 1 oral test. You're only going to be responsible for the oral test for what we cover in this video, which will basically be the Gemara, a handful of Rashis, and the Ran on worksheet 1.6, all of which I'm going to read and translate. You'll be responsible. I'm reading from a punctuated Gemara, just this helpful review tool. If you go on Merkava 32a, you can set it to help yourself practice. You can toggle vowels on and off. You can use their translation and expanded translation as a way to practice. And then when you're ready to practice without, you can go to a regular Gemara, which I'll post, or you can remove the fonts and symbols. But on your test, you will be reading from an unpunctuated Gemara. But punctuation is a great tool to use to get comfortable. To help yourself get comfortable if that's important to you. Okay, here we go. Echad din Mishnah and Sechet Sanhedrin on Bet Amud Aleph. Echad dinei mamonot v'echad dinei nefashot b'drisha v'chakira. So both monetary and capital cases require drisha v'chakira, probing questions. Shena amar mishpat echad yelachem. Pasuk says there'll be one system of laws for you, and we saw this Rashi up here. B'drisha v'chakira. Rashi just clarifies what this means. Chakirot udrishot shechokrim et haidim. What this means is the interrogations and the investigations that we investigate the witnesses. As the pasuk says, there will be one legal system for you. And how do we know that you have? So we know that they have to be the same. But how do we know that there's a thing called drisha v'chakira in the first place? In when it comes to capital cases, we have the pasuk v'darash tavachakarta. That's coming from Ir Hanidacha, when we kill the entire city and destroy it, that the judges must investigate. So we know that judges have to investigate in capital cases, and Mishpat Achad teaches us that the judges also have to investigate in monetary cases. Mishnah continues. Ma bein dinei mamonot l'dinei nefashot. What is the difference between monetary and capital cases? Dinei mamonot b'shlosha. Monetary cases have 3 judges. The dinei nefashot b'esrim b'shlosha. And capital cases have 23 judges. Dinei mamonot potchin bein l'schut bein l'chova. In monetary cases, we can open the case with either the side arguing innocent or the side arguing guilty. And in capital cases, we can open with the innocent side, like the innocent side gets to go first. We do not begin with the guilty side. We will fast forward there to the Gemara. It's a long Mishnah, but I want to focus on preparing the Gemara, so we'll start here. Dinei mamonot, in monetary cases, do we really require probing investigative questions? Urminhu, we have a contradictory source. We have a contradictory Breita that reads as follows. Shtar shezmano katuv be'echad b'nisan b'shmita. We have a case, a contract, and then the date written on it is Aleph Nisan in the Shemitah year. Uva'u edim v'amru, and new witnesses come and say, Hey, achatem edim al shtar zeh. So if Reuven and Shimon are the witnesses on the contract, Levi and Yehuda come and say, how could you testify? How could you have testified to this loan on this contract? Is it not true that on that day you were with us in a different location? So the contract is Aleph Nisan, New York, and you were with us in Boston on Aleph Nisan. The Breta concludes, Shtar Kasher Ve'edav Ksherin, the contract is valid and the witnesses on the contract are still valid witnesses. We are concerned, we assume that perhaps the witnesses wrote it, delayed v'kitvu, and they wrote it. So they wrote a later date on the contract, which is still valid. So basically, the judges are concerned about something. They are assuming something. They're assuming information. And if you think that we require probing questions, how is it that we are assuming? How is it that we are concerned that perhaps they delayed in writing it? If the judges are allowed to ask investigative questions, they would never have to be concerned about it. They would never have to assume anything. They could just ask. So clearly this Breita is describing a world in which the judges are not asking probing questions. And we'll continue here with Rabbi Chanina's solution to this contradiction. Again, Mishnah says we ask probing questions to the witness. In Dinei Manot, Breita seems to indicate that we do not. Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Davar Torah, according to the Torah, the Deoraita rule, both monetary cases and capital cases require investigative questions. They both require investigative questions. As it is written, you will have one legal system for you. So the original rule was the Deoraita rule, that we ask probing questions. And what's the reason the rabbi said that monetary cases do not require Drusha v'Chakira. So just to pause here for a second, the Rabbi Chanina's solution, we have to read a little bit in between the lines, is that the Mishnah and the Breita are not contradicting each other. They're telling us the rule at two different stages of history. The Mishnah is telling us the Doraita rule. Originally, we asked probing questions. The rabbis come and change the rule and said that now we're going to make a takana, we're going to make a decree that we no longer ask probing questions. Rabbi Chanina, oh, why did they change it? Here's why. Kedei shalotin ol delep ifnei lovin, in order that we do not lock the door in the face of borrowers. We explain what that means. If we ask probing questions, witnesses could easily get disqualified, even if they're telling the truth, and that will make lenders unwilling to give loans because they're concerned they're going to lose their money, that their witnesses will get disqualified. So they're just not going to take the risk in the first place. So in order to increase the likelihood of loans getting paid back, which increases the likelihood of loans being given, we removed probing questions. Elameata, if that's true, if Rabbi Chanina, if you're correct, and we no longer ask probing questions, next Amud Lamed on bet, ta'ulo yishalmu. The rule should be that if they make a mistake, they do not have to pay. We know the rule is ta'u yishalmu, that if Beit Din makes a mistake, they have to pay for it. Rashi explains why. Ta'u Beit Din, so Beit Din makes a mistake, b'dinei mamanot, in monetary cases, lo yishalmu. They should not have to pay for that mistake. Dedilma, for perhaps, ishavkat lahu, if we allowed them, meaning if we allowed the judges, the drosh v'lachkor, to investigate and to ask questions, hava rav chalamilta, the thing and the matter would become clarified, so the confusion or the mistake would become clarified. V'lo havu ta'u, and they wouldn't have made a mistake. So the Gemara is saying, as Rashi explains, that it's unfair to Beit Din. We're saying you're responsible for mistakes, but we're also preventing you from, we're stopping you from preventing those mistakes. You're not allowed to ask questions, which means you're going to make more mistakes, and you also have to pay for them. Seems unfair. The Gemara kind of says, in the words of our own Yael Picker, yeah, sucks. You have to pay for mistakes. Why? Kol shekain shetin oldel b'fnei lovin. That even more so, if we removed the rule of ta'u yishalmu, if we said that Beit Din doesn't have to pay for their mistakes, that would lock the door in the face of borrowers. That would prevent people from giving back loans, because Beit Din paying for their mistakes is the last security, the last back pocket measure for the lender to be able to say, at least I can get my money back this way. And if we remove that, people won't give loans. So yeah, it's hard to be a judge. You have to pay for your mistakes, and we're making mistakes a little bit more likely because we're not letting the judges ask probing questions. We're going to fast forward now to Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, which we're going to note a contradiction, an issue with Dinei Mamanot Machzirin. Our Mishnah had said that in monetary cases we can reopen the case, either direction. We're minhu. We have a contradiction. We have a contradictory Mishnah in Sechet Bechorot. Dana Tadin. If you judge the judgment, the judge made the verdict. Zikat Chayav, decided the person who is guilty was really. They announced him innocent. Chayevet Hazakai. They found guilty someone who was really innocent. I said the one for it. They found innocent someone who was really guilty. They found guilty someone who was really innocent. Timei Tatahor. They found pure something that was really impure. Tiher Tatamei. They decreed pure what was really impure. Basically, they just made a mistake. Masha Asa Asui. What's done is done. The verdict is closed. We cannot reopen the case. Vi Shalemi Beito. And the judge must pay from their own wealth. So basically, that if Ruvain, the judge, messed up, he has what's done is done. We can't reopen the case and switch the verdict. Ruvain has to pay for the mistaken verdict. So our Mishnah said we reopen the case. This Mishnah says Masha Asui. What do? Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says he's going to resolve the contradiction. Lo kasha. There's no contradiction. There's no issue here. Kan b'mumche. This one, our Mishnah that says we reopen the case, is talking about a mumche, a expert judge. Kan b'she'eno mumche. This one over here, this Mishnah in Masechet Bechorot is dealing with a non-expert judge, and we have a Rashi here who explains why is it that an expert judge is allowed to reopen mumche. So an expert judge, according to Rav Yosef, yesh bo koach lachzor. The expert judge has the strength, has the ability to reopen the case, to switch the verdict. The lo matzi lamei le ba'al din. And a ba'al din, one of the litigants, one of the people in the case, lo matzi lamei le, will not be able to tell him, the judge, ana kitama kama didach avdina. Ani, I am kitama kama, your initial reason didach of yours avdina. That's what I'm going to follow. Basically, the person who won the case might say, no, I don't want to reopen the case. I'm going to follow your first verdict. But an expert, we can say like, no, the expert has authority. The expert has respect. And you can't say, the person who won the case mistakenly can't say, I don't care about this. Everyone obviously trusts the expert. But a non-expert, someone who's just doesn't have that authority, matzi amarle, the person who won the case is able to say, mi yemar, mi omer, who says, ditama batra didach ikar, who says that your second reason, your second argument, your new argument, ikar, is the correct one. Dilma, perhaps, kama ikar, your original ruling was correct. Uvahai hu deta'id. Oh, you think you're making a mistake? You think you made a mistake? Maybe now you're making a mistake. Therefore, I don't feel like I don't accept that we're reopening the case. A non-mumche is not able to does not have the authority to say we're going to reopen the case. He's flip flopping. He doesn't know what he's doing, so we don't allow a non-mumche to reopen the case. That's Rav Yosef's solution. We're going to see another solution offered by Rav Sheshet. We're skipping down a few lines. Rav Sheshet Amar Kan Sheta'a Bidvar Mishnah. Our Mishnah, which says you can reopen the case, is when you make a mistake Bidvar Mishnah. Literally the words of the Mishnah, and the Gemara will see. The Gemara will explain what that means. Kan Sheta'a B'Shikul Hadad. But when do you not reopen a case? When do you say case closed? Sheta'a B'Shikul Hadad. You made a mistake in weighing knowledge, and the Gemara will also explain what that means. So basically, if you have an explicit mistake, you can reopen the case. If you have a non-explicit mistake, a more gray area mistake, we don't reopen the case. Ta'amar Rav Sheshet, Amar Rav Asi, as Rav Sheshet says the name of Rav Asi, Ta'abish Dvar Mishnah, if you make a mistake in the words of the Mishnah, Choser, you go back and reopen the case. Ta'abishu Kadad, if you make a mistake in weighing knowledge, Choser, we don't reopen the case. And now we're trying to define what does Dvar Mishnah mean? What does it mean you make an explicit mistake? Amar le Ravina or Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, Afilu b'ta'a b'Ravichia Rabbi What if I make a mistake? We're not going to see Rashi inside. So bidvar b'tosefta, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Yoshia. That you make the Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yoshia are seen as the editors, the compilers of the Tosefta, this Tanaitic source. It's not a Mishnah, didn't make it into the Mishnah, but it's real, legitimate sources. But is that considered To'eh Bidvar Mishnah? Is that the it's not quite as authoritative as the Mishnah, but it's a real authoritative source. What if you make a mistake you rule against an explicit Tosefta? Is that considered, in parentheses, To'eh Bidvar Mishnah? Is that considered an explicit mistake? I apologize for the bell. Amar Le'in. Yeah, Ravashi says, yep, that's an explicit mistake. A Tosefta is a true authoritative source. If you rule against a Tosefta, you are not, it's not a real ruling. We're going to see this Mishnah here. Sorry, we have to run back to this Rashi who explains why. To'eh bidvar Mishnah. If you make a mistake in Dvar Mishnah, sheta'uto matsui bidvar HaMishnah. Your mistake is found in the words of the Mishnah. You said this is kosher, and the Mishnah explicitly said this is not kosher. Ein dino din legamre. Your verdict, your judgment, is not a true judgment. If you explicitly rule against an explicit Mishnah or Tosefta or Gemara, as we'll see, it's not a real verdict. The verdict was meaningless because it was explicitly wrong, the choser, and we go back and reopen the case. So we determined that a Tosefta is considered a true authoritative source. Amar Afilu, Ravina asks again, but Ravu Shmuel, what about Rav and Shmuel, these early Amoraim, these early stages of the Gemara? If they have an explicit ruling, is that considered a To'eh Bidvar Mishnah? Amar Le'in. And Ravashi says yes, that is an explicit ruling. That the early stages of the Gemara are considered explicit sources. Ravina says Afilu bididi vididach. Ravina and Ravashi, we said before, these are like the last stages of the Gemara. They're seen as the closing generation of the Gemara, and Ravina wonders, what about the rulings that we make between me and you? What about our rulings? Are those considered explicit, non-controvertible, true authoritative sources? Amar Le, and Ravashi responds, Atu anan katle kane ba'agma anan. Atu doesn't really have a translation. It's like the word et, it's a filler word. Anan katle kane ba'agma. Are we just like reed cutters in the lake? Basically, what are we? Chopped liver? We're insignificant. We don't mean anything. No, we're sages of this generation, and our rulings are explicit. So basically, from the Mishnah to Tosefta Gemara, if you rule explicitly against a clear source, that's To'eh Bidvar Mishnah, not considered a true verdict. We reopen the case.